Hi, and welcome to the Healthcare CEO Show, where you'll find actionable insights on healthcare leadership from the best and brightest in the industry. I'm your host, Daniel Fernandez. Let's get a pulse. Welcome to the show. This season, we are taking a closer look at the intersection of healthcare and M&A. And with me today, I have Richard Lever. He's the CEO of Alliance Physical Therapy Partners. Richard, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to speak today.
Now, before we get started, tell us a little bit about Alliance.
Yeah, Alliance is an outpatient physical therapy business. We've been around for about 8 years. We have approximately about 140 clinics. We see well over 1 million outpatient therapy visits a year and over 250,000 in industrial injury prevention visits. So nationwide, so quite a large entity, and we're growing rapidly.
And one of the interesting things about your background is you have a background as a licensed physical therapist, and you've been a healthcare executive over the years. Do you feel like that's prepared you for the growth in dealing with a practice that is growing primarily through whether it be de novo locations or acquisitions?
I think being a licensed clinician is extremely helpful for a healthcare organization for a number of reasons. Yes, as you say, I've been a clinician for well over 30 years now and still practice occasionally and maintain licensure in multiple states. I think really what it brings to the table is a certain mindset, certainly a degree of credibility with clinicians, and then also perhaps some additional or empathy and accountability. So I never ask my clinicians to do anything that I'm either not capable or not prepared to do myself. And I think that goes a long way. And lastly, if you read the literature specifically for physician-led organizations, it does indicate that organizations that do have a clinician as the CEO tend to perform better in the long run. So I think there's definitely advantages to being a clinician. Perhaps there's some blind spots as well, but I found it very helpful for leading the organization and growing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's primarily two tracks to the top. It's usually the business track, and then there's others that start off on the caregiver track, and you started off on the caregiver track. Do you feel like it gives you an edge when it comes to relating to physicians and building out better, customer experiences and things like that?
Absolutely. I can talk the talk with other clinicians, and I think that gives me a degree of credibility that's very difficult to gain quickly with non-clinicians. Not to say non-clinicians can't manage healthcare business. In fact, I would say nowadays it's probably the majority of healthcare business are actually run by non-clinicians. But I find that connecting to purpose, connecting to the clinicians directly, it tends to be easier, and there's an assumption that I get it as well as being a clinician.
Yeah, I personally started as a caregiver, and I can, empathize with your track. What I was absolutely terrible at management when I first started switching from caregiver to executive teams. What sort of personal shifts or things did you learn along the way that helped to improve your leadership style?
Yeah, moving from a clinician to a leader has required quite a shift in how I approach tasks, processes, managing, etc. Whilst treating one-on-one is very gratifying in itself, there certainly is limited as it pertains to skill set for leading multiple people. So I think really it's shifting from a perspective of literally one-on-one to a more holistic mindset was vital. The other thing is really understanding, accepting that you have to lead through others. As a leader, you can't do it all, and you have to empower and trust others with regards to getting things done and helping you can build the business. And then lastly, it's really surrounding yourself and building an effective team and understanding that you're only as good as the team that you surround yourself with.
Yeah. How important do you think having a high-powered leadership team is, especially with a company like yours that's scaling so quickly?
Fundamentally, it's 99% of what you need to be successful, I believe. Obviously, you need your mission, vision, values, and but your team execute, your leadership team executes on that, along with filtering it down in the organization. And I always believe that if you have the right position, 99.9% of the time you will be successful in whatever business and whatever endeavors you're trying to do if you have that right team in place.
Scaling can present many challenges as you scale. What are some of those challenges that you had to overcome as you were scaling?
There are many, many challenges with any organization, internal and external. Again, I think the main challenges are being able to continue to build and grow and maintain culture. To be honest, that's one of the issues. Then it's also scaling the infrastructure within the business to not only meet the needs of today, but actually meet the needs of tomorrow, next year, and 5 years' time. So it's a constant battle, well, not necessarily battle, but it's a constant task to be able to make sure that the infrastructure, the platform, and the skill sets of individuals that you have as part of your team are capable of allowing you to not only serve what you have, but actually for future needs as well. So I think that's probably the key factors.
Yeah, and as you're scaling up and you're bringing on new practices, how do you balance the need to build them into the infrastructure, especially from a tech stack perspective, while also allowing for some local autonomy in certain aspects?
Absolutely. That's a difficult balancing act, but it's critical that you do that. I use the analogy of really, a car analogy. Mm-hmm. When I think of balancing this centralization component and standardization with also being respectful of local culture, local history, the local nuances, I think of for instance, the Jaguar S-Class, the Lincoln LS, and a Ford Thunderbird, for instance. They had exactly the same powertrains, exactly the same chassis, but they looked very different. They drove very differently. And that's really what we try to achieve, is the underlying structure is standardized to be able to allow you to get economies of scale, and follow process to achieve higher levels of quality. But it's also understanding that everyone is slightly different and accommodating those differences.
Now, you mentioned culture. We've kind of honed in on some of the internal aspects. Now, externally, how do you ensure that patient care is maintained, especially when you're dealing with multiple practitioners across multiple markets?
Yeah, I think the critical thing is, first and foremost, is having alignment with a strong culture. So it's a very clear shared mission, vision, and certainly values. So I think that's the first thing. Is then having an agreed upon strategic plan. Going down further, it's then making sure that we're able to measure. If we cannot measure then what we're doing, then we have no ability to know whether we're being successful or not, or how we're doing. And then after that, it's then really a matter of setting clear expectations to achieve accountability for that as well. And then going backwards a little bit, it's again talking about this standardization of process. Whilst I think people are afraid to talk about standardization, thinking that there's kind of a micromanagement component, ultimately standardization of process is to ensure quality. That's the way that I look at it. And if you have that focus, if you have the processes in place and they're followed, then quality will occur.
Is there a leadership principle or set of principles that you follow when it comes to making very important, potentially high stakes decisions within the organization?
Yes. We as an organization have a number of what I call guiding principles. And that's really foundational to the business again. Every organization may have slightly different guiding principles, but I'll list out the ones that we have. First and foremost is the concept of a people-first organization, making sure that we take care of each other and take care of everyone that is around us, be those internal stakeholders and even external stakeholders, be the patients, referral sources, etc. Then for us, it's the concept of partnership. And that's not necessarily legal sense, but the concept that everyone has a voice, everyone's voice is important, everyone is included in the conversation, and then together we end up with better results. And then the others, we talk about intentional caring, being very proactive in how we interact and how we take care of each other. And then stronger together, the concept that as an organization, even though we have different brands, we understand that together we will be more successful and we are stronger as an organization. And then lastly is the clinician-led principle.
In terms of trends, especially as it pertains to the physical therapy space, are there any trends that you're observing right now that you may one day want to incorporate in the practice?
Yes, from a clinical perspective, the human body doesn't change too quickly. So from that perspective, it's really, there hasn't been dramatic changes with regards to what is done for patients. Obviously, with increased evidence-based practice and protocols, that is a given, really, that we adjust care accordingly. But where I see really kind of three trends within the industry, shall I say, or within the organization. The first off is technological innovation. We've mentioned it already. I believe there's going to be a profound shift, not only with the clinical care, but the administrative management as well within healthcare associated with the adoption of various components of AI, for instance. And I think that will be a differentiator for certain organizations. Secondly is labor force shortages. That's definitely a trend, and that's going to continue to impact our ability, not only with physical therapy, but also with many other healthcare organizations that have services, being able to create an environment and culture that really people want to come and stay at. So that's the second trend. And then lastly is really reimbursement concerns. And that's not new. That's been going on for 20 years, essentially. But I think they will continue. And as an organization and as healthcare generally, we have to look and try and work out a solution where providers are adequately compensated to be able to maintain, sustain, clinical care for the majority or for our communities we serve.
We've spoken to other CEOs that are dealing with the recruitment, for instance, with nursing, because there are potentially nursing shortages nationwide. Are you seeing any of that in the physical therapy space?
Absolutely. Depending on who you listen to, what you read, the degree of shortages is varied, but there is definitely a structural shortage. And this has been exacerbated with COVID, but it's been ongoing and long-term. And to be honest with you, in many ways, it's getting worse. We are training more people, but unfortunately, with the aging population and more active population, we're still not training enough to be able to keep up with demand. So in the short and medium term, there's definitely going to be continuation of issues with regards to not having enough clinicians. And then on top of that, people are understanding that for physical therapy is a cost-effective solution. So not only do we have more people wanting physical therapy, but there's an understanding, an appreciation that therapy can be a primary provider and a cost-effective provider for care. So certainly there's a significant demand for our services.
Are there any other headwinds you see in the future that may be challenging?
Headwinds. But I think as an organization, ultimately it's being capable of embracing change and adapting to those changes. So whatever comes along, we have to find a way to be able to manage it and embrace that change to be successful. We talk about margins in healthcare being eroded, but still our margins are significantly higher than perhaps in supermarkets, for instance. So I think it's It's just a matter of making sure that we don't bury our kind of head in the sand, and we adjust as needed going forwards.
Yeah. When you're envisioning the future of Alliance, what does that look like? What sort of changes do you foresee coming, and how do you anticipate continued growth?
Yes. So again, healthcare is changing continuously. It's I think probably one of the industries that has to navigate as much change or more change than many, based on regulatory and payer rules, etc., governmental changes. So it's the only constant, as they say, is change, and that's certainly true in healthcare. I think Alliance, in order to be able to kind of continue to grow and sustain this growth that we've had, I think it's essentially acknowledging that to be successful as a healthcare entity, we have to make sure that we're articulating our value and advocating for ourselves. And then developing new care models as well to be able to accommodate these changes that are occurring within the healthcare landscape. Essentially, more people to treat with less money.
Makes sense. Looking back on all the scalability, all of the expansion across the country, if you were to give someone advice that's looking to do the exact same thing, what advice would you give that CEO in a similar position that may be at the very beginning stages of scaling a company nationwide?
That's a very good question. I think it goes back to this concept of surrounding yourself with people, great people. You cannot do it on your own. And the healthcare landscape is extremely complex to navigate. And you cannot possibly know and understand the idiosyncrasies of one individual. So it's making sure that you're not afraid to ask for help from others, and being open to ideas, suggestions, to be able to kind of challenge your basic thinking and also pivot accordingly, because it's never going to go as you plan at all, and nothing never does. Anything worth having is going to require a lot of work and effort, and also changing of thinking along the way.
Nice. So surrounding yourself with knowledgeable people who bring a lot to the table. And speaking of knowledge, there's a saying that CEOs, specifically most leaders, are readers. Do you have a favorite book or something that has inspired you along the way that you may go back and read occasionally, or something that you thought was impactful in your journey?
Yeah, I definitely read a lot. In fact, as an organization, we actually have what's called Lessons for Leaders, where about 3 times a year we choose a book, a leadership book, and we read it all together. So my favorite book is always the one that I've kind of just read, but I've just read the book. I think one that I enjoyed immensely and was kind of evidence-based, and certainly I found critical to my development as leader, was Ambitious. But there's many, many books.
Nice. We're going to bring the show to a close, but before we do, is there any last thoughts you would give our listener who's in a similar position to you, who may be struggling with some of the same challenges you are, and looking to scale up just as you have?
Yes, for senior leaders, I think I would say that, making sure that people understand that imposter syndrome is real, and, managing that is always a challenge. I think given the current climate and the challenges with the current climate, I think it's making sure that as leaders, we try and maintain perspective, and also, show grace and compassion to ourselves and to others around us. I believe societally that at current time, there's a distinct lack of that. And I think it's making sure that we take care of each other.
And with that, I'll bring our show to a close. I want to thank Mr. Richard Lever from Alliance Physical Therapy Partners for joining us today on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on the Healthcare CEO Show. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for more insights from the top. Until next time, lead boldly and care deeply. See you on the next episode.